So, did you go to the thing this morning? Candlelight Vigil?
Yes, I did.
Tell us about that.
This morning, the Sunrise Remembrance was held at the Clark County Convention Center, and it was really nice. It was actually very well done, very tasteful, and I got to shake hands with Sheriff Lombardo, Stephen Shuck, Aaron Rouse walked by. I said hey to him, didn't necessarily shake his hand. Long story about that one, but Sisolak was there as well. So all the big guys were there, and I was right up front. So I got really good video of that.
Sisolak is
the governor of Nevada.
The governor. And did he speak?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Anything of note?
Not really, but there's something that is of note. If he mentioned it, I didn't catch it because I was probably too busy trying to film. And what's happening is he assigned a committee, 7-member committee, to come up with a permanent memorial for the 58, and of course the survivors as well. But the problem with that is so I was distracted. There's a necklace on the ground. The problem with that, or maybe it's not a problem, we'll see. There's your tanks in the background. Is that he didn't come out like months ago and say, hey, we're wanting to do this. Let's get some feedback and let's talk to everybody. So he's going to have these 7 members. They're going to come up with a permanent memorial, but it doesn't sound like it's too open to the public. Now there's a vote on the committee tomorrow, a vote for the actual committee tomorrow. I'm going to make certain to attend that to find out exactly how they plan on doing this. Because it's crucial, because right now the Memorial Gardens, you're familiar with Las Vegas, so imagine how far down the Memorial Gardens are, or Memory Gardens or whatever, as compared to where I'm at right now. And so if you come to Vegas and you're wanting to honor the fallen, there's nothing here. The only memorial here is Melissa's, and thanks to Eddie Schmitz for coming through and making it more of a permanent memorial. And so we'll take a look at that in a minute, but there's nothing here. It's all, you can see, it's just the dirt lot. They're going to turn this into a parking lot for the stadium across the way there, which you can actually see between Mandalay Bay and the Delano. I said it right that time. I always say Delano. Delano.
Yeah, so I mentioned something about what they've reported that they're going to do with the location on my episode that went out this week, which is that first it's going to be a parking lot for the Raiders, but the ultimate plan is some type of a sports / community facility that was supposed to contain a memorial.
Correct.
So when they talk about,
that's my understanding too. The only thing is that it's kind of like an afterthought. If you read the article, the way it was written and the way it was put out there was kind of like, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Oh, and they didn't say they were going to put it there. They said that they would be open to listen to ideas about putting a memorial there or what have you. They didn't say they're going to foot the bill, nothing like that. So
now this governor's committee, is that just assumed that the memorial they're talking about would be at the site or not necessarily?
Nope, we know nothing. There's no information on that yet. I'd like to speculate that it would be natural to be here. I can tell you this: there's a few people that are on that committee that I'm familiar with, and I know that they're going to push for it to be down here. They can still keep the other one. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's its own. It has its own feeling. It's own. Its own. I'm lack of words here on this one. But basically, that area is set up in such a way, according to the person that designed it, to be like mom's backyard, mom's garden, that kind of thing. So anyone can come. You can plant anything you want. You can add stuff to the memorial and things like that, which I like that. I do like that idea. The problem was they weren't really taking care of it. And so, again, Eddie Schmitz, he was going out of his way. He lives here. And he goes down there. He was down there several times a week, just clearing out weeds and doing everything that they probably should have done. But of course, their claim is they didn't want to maintain it because they wanted it to be like a mom's garden. And I guess moms don't maintain their gardens. I don't know. Not very wise.
So I read that some of the victims are not real thrilled about it being used as a parking lot, at least until the other thing is built. And I tend to agree with that.
I do too. Well, I guess if I had my druthers, if I had to choose between it being a parking lot and a training facility for SWAT, which was the original plan that they came up with, they were going to donate it to LVMPD as a training facility for SWAT. Now, there's two sides of the fences there. Some people could say, well, that'd be great because then they would be right here if another situation happened. But the problem is that there's a lot of people that have some issues with LVMPD as far as the investigation was concerned, this information coming out and so forth. So it kind of like rubbed people wrong as well. So putting a parking lot there, you're basically going to pave over the entire area where family members died and make a parking lot, and then have a healing center, which would be for the players, more of a medical sports facility, or, like a rec room and weightlifting and stuff like that, I guess. So I guess with windows so people can come watch everybody work out. I don't know how they would do that, but that would make sense, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine the victims also would not be thrilled with the idea that MGM is the one putting together the memorial. A little ironic considering their failure to take responsibility to date.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. I think the situation is that, and that what would MGM do? They're part of the problem, but they also need to be part of the solution. There needs to be some healing process involved, and it needs to involve MGM. MGM needs to, the mediation is pretty close to over, and they really need to come forward and say, look, this. They don't even have to preface it. They don't have to admit liability or anything. If people died on their property, if someone dies on your property, a bunch of people, 58 people die on your property, over 400 shot, over 800 injured, and 22,000 that attended the event, you should have an obligation to do something a little bit more than just tell people you're going to build a parking lot. Yeah.
Well, I think it would behoove the attorneys for the victims to make that part of the settlement. What money they're going to designate to a memorial, and when they're going to build it, where they're going to build it, et cetera.
And that was mentioned. Rest in peace, Catherine Lombardo. We did have some talks about that, but I never got any answer back. It was more or less in passing.
So before we talk about, since you're at the tanks, I want to talk about them, but also since you just mentioned the settlement, give us an update on what you know about the settlement with the victims.
Well, the settlement with the victims, there's several things I can bring up to speed on. A lot of people weren't aware that back in the beginning, Sheriff Lombardo and Governor Sisolak put together a GoFundMe type account, and that people could donate quite a bit of money into it. Those monies have been distributed. I don't think a lot of people are aware of it. Where I won't say the dollar. I know the dollar amount, but I'm not going to say the dollar amount. A specific dollar amount was distributed amongst the 58 families of the victims. And then a different amount was distributed amongst all the other remaining victims, or I don't know how they distributed that part of what the actual dollar amounts there were. I'm familiar with the dollar amounts for the 58, but not the other. And so that's been done. So that's complete. Now, as far as the update on the mediation, I believe on the 15th, they're going to go back in and do some more talks. I don't know. I mean, I kind of know some of the discussions, but not enough to really come out here and report on it. And be sure about what I'm saying. But the 15th, I believe, is going to be more ironing out the details. It's a lot of logistics to move $800 and some odd million into the pockets of the people that deserve it. But the other end of the spectrum is too is that, of course, the lawyers, they're not going to be happy until they get more and more and more and more. They want it to actually hurt MGM, and so I'm sure that they're looking for ways to make that dollar amount higher, because that's what they're paid to do.
Mm-hmm. So you think there's still two open questions. What's the total amount, and then how we're going to distribute it?
Correct.
So that means that we haven't made a lot of progress.
That's correct. Sorry about that. Hit the wire there. That's true. I think, the progress has been made. I think most of it is complete. I don't think there's a lot to work with here, other than some of the, iron out the particulars and what have you. But you're a lawyer. You know how long that could take. They could drag that out for another year if they wanted. But it's been 2 years. So, and, the lawsuits of, there's a lot of settlements that are out there, and there's people that are probably wanting to take it individually. So,
yeah, the sad part is, to the extent people need money, they needed it ASAP, not 3 years down the road.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about the tanks. That's interesting. I've never been in. That's actually airport property, right, where the tanks are?
Yeah, so I'm going to get up right close to them until they kick me out.
Okay, and I think, if I'm remembering correctly, the last time we did an episode together, you said some interesting things, if I'm remembering correctly, about the tanks. And
yes, I did.
Was he or was he not attempting to hit them, etc.? Remind us about that.
Stephen Paddock, the alleged shooter, the person we don't have the ballistics on, the person we can't put the guns in the hands of. The other side's going to love that. He was not shooting at the tanks. If you look at the tank behind me, I'm going to pan it up here a little bit. I can get the thing to work. Let's go that way. So that white patch that you see there, that was where the shot was. That's shot number 7 or 8 from room 134. And the situation that you're looking at with the tanks is that everybody thought he was just shooting at the tanks. Well, Mandalay Bay is right there.
How many yards would you say that is?
2,000 or 2,000 feet or 2,000 feet. So
how hard of a shot is that?
I can make it. I can make it with my eyes closed. The problem is that a lot of people were claiming it's a 308 shot. You can, once you test for, your range and elevation, you can hit these targets. I mean, there's no reason why I wouldn't hit it. But the problem is that he wasn't shooting at the tanks, because if he was, Stephen Paddock was a very intelligent man. That is a fact. And given that, I seriously doubt that he was shooting at the tanks. What he was probably shooting at, which I won't show you, and I'm looking at it, is an object that's beside the tanks or near the tanks. And what happens is this: you could shoot at these tanks all day long. I could stand right here with a fully automatic rifle and just launch shots into these tanks. They're not going to explode. What's in the tanks, as you can see on the sign there, if I get closer here, you're going to see a sign that says Jet A, unless it's backwards because of the way the camera does. But that's Jet A fuel. Jet A fuel is basically kerosene, and it has to be atomized in the air before it'll work. That's how jet engines work. They basically spray fine mist into the jet engine and then ignite it, and then that goes out the back. That's where you get your thrust. And you're not going to get that by just burning it. You could take a torch you could put it in a jar, take a torch to it, throw matches in it. It's not going to ignite. So what you have to do is hit something else. So inside this area here, and actually I just noticed they actually changed it, which is good. There was a object that was over here that apparently doesn't appear to be there anymore. And that object, there's another one on top of the tank. And if you hit that, it's already pressurized. So the fuel inside that chamber would spray into the air, and then your next shot would ignite it. The first shot wouldn't ignite it. The next shot would, because he was supposedly, and we're still not 100% certain on the exact, because we don't have the ballistics yet. I mean, I kind of know what rounds he was shooting, but we're not 100% certain that he was shooting the incendiary heads, which would cause that to ignite if he actually hit that.
What is the structure that you're talking about? What would you call it?
Well, for FAA won't allow me to say what it is. So I'm not going to say it, but it'd be like telling someone how to do something, like giving them an instruction manual.
Anyway, it's another type of tank.
Well, it's a pressurized. It's to get the fuel from the tank to the designation of where the tank's going to go.
And how hard would that have been to hit?
That would have been quite a bit harder. In fact, he never hit it. That's what he was aiming at. And you can't really see here. And this thing's, whenever I turn this thing on, it wants to not. Let me see if I can press it. There we go. Now I can do it. I had to press another button. So I'm going to show you. He hit this tank twice. So the object he was aiming at was obviously in this direction, and the particular object was most likely on top of this tank.
Did the bullet actually puncture the tank?
Yes, it did.
So,
It punctured the tank.
So gas would have been leaking out if it was that filled?
These tanks are built like the Titanic in that it's a double hull. So you have an inner tank and outer tank. So if the outer tank is struck or something happens to it, or a car crashes into it, or even a plane crashes into it, it's probably not going to do much. Well, if a plane crashes into it, it'll probably do some damage. But the tank itself is a dual layer. So if it hit, the inside fuel would run into the middle cavity in between the two tanks. I don't know if you can see it there, but if you look up, you'll see the patch here, which is where that one hit is. But if you look at the lip, you're going to see another small patch. Do you see that?
Yeah, right toward the top, just top right of the other patch.
Yeah, right at the lip. So that there, and if you follow this trajectory straight over, it's a direct hit from that floor. A lot of people said he couldn't hit that lip, and
now we believe he had armor-piercing bullets, correct?
Correct. Well, armor-piercing and or incendiary heads. They're not. The ballistics didn't specifically say which bullet were these bullets. I mean, we know what they are based on just what he bought from Haig. But
do armor-piercing bullets fire just like any other bullet?
Yep, they do.
And they're just what, a lot more expensive?
Well, yeah, they're definitely a lot more expensive, and on top of that, they do a lot more damage. They're made to penetrate, different layers, like the different thicknesses of steel. You have armor piercing, which is the specifically designed to pierce metal plates, i.e. a Humvee or APC, armored personnel carrier.
Are they legal?
Like yes.
They are legal. So what is I forget the name of the guy who was charged.
Haig.
I thought he was charged for selling armor piercing. No,
he was, and they're not legal to just sell in the way he was selling it, and that was the issue. But they're legal in some states, not legal in others. They're the laws about the types of bullets he was selling, plus he was making them. It gets a little convoluted when you start getting into that area, which is why the case is being dragged on, because there's a lot of other circumstances. And
so that case is still pending.
Correct.
And
Correct.
The only reason that Paddock would have bought armor piercing would be because of these tanks, right? Is there any other reason we could think of why he would have armor piercing? That's
the only reason. Unless the only other reason is if he had picked a different target, such as a police officer or someone in a car or something like that. But he only fired 8 shots, and all 8 shots went this direction. The first 5 shots came this direction. They all missed. The 5th shot and the 6th shot were successful in that they hit a target. And shots number 7 and number 8 were done quite a bit later. So from 10:08 till 10:09, that's when the shots made this direction were fired. Now, I originally, as many people thought, when you first heard the first shots at the venue, the very first shots were believed to have been going into the tanks. However, subsequently, everyone was able to find out that that area was not the case, and the area that was being shot into was the VIP area and into the area right in front of the stage.
How many shots did he fire initially into the VIP area and center of the stage before he then moved to the tanks?
That is a slightly questionable, but it's 6 to 8 shots that were initially fired, and those are 223 rounds. He fired those using the same weapon that he fired with the bump stock, and he was doing single shots. He was basically ranging. You basically fire some shots, and you either do ranging, or the sick-minded thought is that he wanted to actually see through the scope, if he fired the one that had the scope, to see what he was actually hitting. That's closer to what I believe is probably the case. And then once he realized people started running around, he realized, oh, I better start shooting for real. And he stopped shooting the single shots and, went essentially bump stock auto, if you want to call it that way.
And, I hate even thinking about or talking about such a sick mind, but what would have been his sick thinking about starting with a handful of shots at the festival itself and then moving to the tanks and then moving back?
Well, the situation, I mean, turn it around this way here. Metro's finest driving around. I'm sorry, say that question again. I apologize.
Putting your head into his sick head, what could have been his thinking behind starting with, a few random shots at the festival, then moving to a few random shots at the tanks, and then back to the festival?
Well, the first few shots, again, being the sick-minded individual, and then starting the other shots and then switching off, he didn't really switch back and forth. The only time he did, he was basically, in my mind, now this is speculation on my part, because obviously we don't have the person to talk to, but based on my history and looking at these things, the first shots were basically into that VIP area or very close to where Jason Aldean was. So the question could be, was he shooting at Jason Aldean? And did he miss those shots and hit the people in there? Now, I'll walk over there in a minute and I'll show you exactly how that angle is, and you can get a very good perspective of how that would work.
Do you think he could see Jason Aldean from his window?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. At least he could see the place he was, because the way the stage is you know those little bars that go up, the angled bars that look like the I can't remember the proper term for them, but like DJ booth type stuff. Those are around the perimeter of the stage, and then you have basically graphics that are painted over some form of fabric that covers the rest of it. It's not really a solid structure. So he would just have to estimate where he thought Aldean would be and then fire into it. Now that may be the case, because I don't think I've ever said this before. My room, when I was originally here, I was in the 200 wing, 32219, and I could see where if he was in 32135, that angle would be okay to try to see onto the stage. The problem is if he would have been in 3221 or 32235, Jesus, let me get my bearing straight. 32235, which is at this end. Let me point at the building here so you can get an idea. All right, so we have Mandalay Bay here, and this side here is your 100 wing. This side here is your 200 wing. Now this is inverted on this, I believe, because of the way the camera does. But the angle from 32235 may actually have given him a better shot at the stage. But remember,
the 200 wing instead of the 100 wing.
Correct.
Which is actually a little bit further away, though, right?
Not by much. It is, but it's negligible. It would not really change much.
Well, I believe that if I'm remembering correctly, it's believed that he was scoping things out with his girlfriend 6 months prior, approximately.
Yep.
And she recalls him acting very odd and spending a lot of time looking out the windows and so on. And if I remember correctly, I think that he was in the 200 wing at that point.
That's correct.
Not the 100
that is correct.
wing.
And I believe that's why he was kind of upset that it ended up being the 100 wing that he went to. And with that being the case, now keep in mind, he was, she was even saying that he was, going back and forth from window to window. And they're looking at what she thought at the time, according to her statement, is that he liked watching the planes take off. So from there, we're literally right next door to the airport. I'm at the back entrance to McCarran. I'm within 50 feet of that gate. And from this location, she thought he was just watching the planes take off, but then she could tell there was something a little off. It was obviously off enough for her to remember it.
Right.
Yep.
Now, he knocked out, as we know, 2 windows. What was one of them knocked out, do you believe, solely so that he could shoot at the tanks, or do you think he also shot out of that window at the crowd?
He never shot out the window. The window was hammered out. I actually have one right here. Let's take a look at it.
Yeah, sorry. It's my understanding he hammered them both out, but as far as what shooting he did out of that second window, that would have been at the tanks.
Correct. The shooting out of the second window, room 134, the same room that Brian Hodge said he was staying in, that room is where he shot at the tanks. And all 8 shots from that room, the 6 that were done between 10:08 and 10:09, and the 2 that were done 20 seconds before he committed suicide, those were done from that room. And there were no – go ahead.
Yeah, it's all the other shooting was out of the other window at the crowd.
Correct.
And what do you think about the floor, the 30-second floor? Is that, do you think, the most optimal floor he could have chosen, essentially, or?
Any sniper knows this. If you're firing from an elevated position, as long as you're above the highest object that would be an obstacle for sight to range, then that would be ideal. So in this case, where he was ideal. If you look back behind me too, originally people thought that one of the shooters may have been in those two towers there that was originally for a Ferris wheel that was going to go here. And then over here on this side, which you can't really see, but you can see the McDonald's sign probably in the distance. And there's a mound right there. And some Mike Adams, I'll just name him, I don't really care, I don't have very little respect for the guy. He said that was probably where your second shooter was that mound. But any elevated position would be advantageous. But obviously the 32nd floor, even higher would be even better. But there's a certain point when you get too high that you have to account for gravity pulling the bullet down at a different angle. So your calculations are going to be different. And I think that's why he wanted to check his calculations, because the calculations generally that give you bullet drop are based on a person firing level at a target. They're not necessarily calculated at a altitude. So if you're already at 300 or so feet firing down, those calculations don't work as well. That's why snipers have a different set of calculations, or how to do calculations. They actually have computers now that do it. But that's just one of the ways. Whenever you're trying to shoot at an object, every time you look at calculations, it's based on you shooting a straight trajectory. It's where you have to aim your rifle.
And he was making these calculations, right? Isn't that one of the things that was found in the room?
Yeah, there was a note that was found in the room that was on the table or on the floor, depending on which statement you're reading. That note had the calculations for the correct distance into the venue. So the calculations were strictly for the venue, and they weren't necessarily for the tanks. So you have to take a look at those and try to decipher how he was calculating those. But generally, that's what that was. There were calculations for windage, elevation, and so forth for distance.
And remind me, where are we on bump stock now? Has that been banned or not?
Banned countrywide. They were President Trump did an executive, I think he did an executive order on that one, or they passed it through Congress really fast, but it's banned nationwide.
Mm-hmm. And I assume that was something that you were very familiar with. I mean, most of us had never heard of this thing called bump stock. I assume you were pretty familiar with it?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. The bump stock is a device that basically you attach to the stock area of a weapon. And essentially imagine it having a spring inside. And as you pull the trigger, the weapon pulls back because of the ejection of the bullet out the front. And then you're hitting the spring mechanism. So you have to learn a balance to hold the weapon as it moves back and forth, bouncing off the spring and going forward, chambering around, firing the round, and then coming back, chambering around, firing around, and coming back. And so it's a balancing act to learn. You can learn it really quick. The muscle memory to learning a bump stock is very quick.
Have you ever used it?
I've fired it maybe 3 times, and I didn't care for them. They hurt you. They're hard on the shoulder. They're not that bad, but they're just hard on the shoulder. I like, if I'm going to go fully auto, I used to have an MP5, and that was a great shooting gun. And fully auto is, obviously the way to go. But what
do you think about the number of shots he fired, which was over 1,000, right, in a 10-minute period, and he's a guy in not the best health,
right?
Is it your theory that that's probably the reason he stopped? He just was out of gas?
Absolutely, and you can tell that by the very last round. Or the very last volley. You can actually hear the firing pattern change as he's firing. In the beginning, when people were analyzing the weapon fire, they thought it was like a M240 or a belt-fed, any of the belt-fed series of automatics or something along those lines. It clearly wasn't. They thought that because of the sound it made, but if you look at the way Mandalay Bay is made, it's a curved building, so you're in a parabolic curve this way, and that obviously amplifies the effect, much like if you would shout into a bowl. But anyway, that's a bad analogy, but it kind of works. But as far as the bump stock being an ideal choice, no, it would not be an ideal choice. But
Well, automatic rifles are illegal though, so if you can't get your hands on them, they're your second best option.
well, he could have got one. They're not illegal. You just have to have a Class 3 license to get it. I used to be a federally licensed firearms dealer under my business called World of Weapons, and we sold quite a few weapons, obviously, mostly it was knives and specialty products for the movies.
So how would an individual Joe like Paddock get a Class 3 license?
To go for the Doc 3 stamp, you submit a form that goes to ATF. Whenever you buy a weapon, there's a form called the 4473. That's your yellow form that you fill out, and that goes to ATF. And you have a 3-day waiting period, which is part of the Brady bill, which when Brady was shot, it was to make people wait 3 days because of Hinckley. But with that type of a Class 3, the waiting is a little bit longer. They do a little bit more investigating into what it is you want it for, whatever. But most people get them for sport shooting and stuff like that. And I can't think of anyone I've ever known or anyone that I've ever sold a firearm to buy a fully auto weapon and go hunting with it. So it's really just for sporting or for what have you. But, this is the United States, and, you got two sides of that coin. Like, why would someone even need that to even go do sport shooting? I mean, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people. But for the person that wants to do it, it makes a lot of sense to them. It's a free country. They want to do it. They should be able to do it.
So what reason would Paddock have given for his desire for an automatic rifle, and that would have satisfied the guy issuing the license?
Well, that would call for speculation on our parts. But if he did do it, it would be normally for sports shooting or of some sort. That's what it would be.
But that's it? You just got to say, I need it for sports shooting, and then as long as you pass a background check, meaning you got no convictions, you get it?
Check the box. You good.
Wow, I didn't know that. I don't know if everybody else knows that. We keep talking about banning semi-automatic rifles. I had no idea that it's
well. They should ban the semi-fully automatic rifles. If you listen to the Democratic side, they've been using that term quite a bit. The semi-fully automatic, which is not even possible. It's just they're using the wrong term. But yeah, semi-automatic, you have to actually do something to make the weapon fire each time.
Right.
So, that's a little different.
Let me ask you this. All the other shootings, and I decided to look it up, and it looks like, according to Wikipedia, that since the Vegas shooting, so in the past 2 years, 16 shootings where 10 or more people were injured or killed, and over 30 where 3 or more were injured or killed. But in all those shootings, did any of them involve automatic rifles, as far as you know?
Okay. Well, the answer to that is basically this. It doesn't matter how many are automatic or what have you. The question that most people have an issue with is the fact that it's an assault type rifle and the number of rounds that it can fire.
But can't you fire a lot more quickly with automatic?
Yeah, of course, but you're less accurate. So now the situation with Paddock, obviously, is that he was firing into essentially a fishbowl is the analogy to use. And so that gave him, the amount of carnage, and without choosing a better word, is a lot higher because he could just shoot and spray, or it's called spray and pray, or
right.
Shoot and spray.
But I mean, that would be a reason to prohibit potentially automatic rifles, because if you're talking about shooting into a crowd, you're going to do a hell of a lot more damage.
Yeah, but you have to be real careful about that, because think about what Hillary Clinton said. Her first things were to ban weapons with silencers and ban. It's like there was no silencers on any of the weapons that were used here, and that was the first thing she said. So a lot of people jump on the bandwagon to ban things because one person or what have you. If you look at all the shootings that happen in the United States each year and compare it to the number of shootings in a mass shooting and the specific weapons that are used, you're probably going to find that the numbers are pretty well skewed. It's just that whenever something like this happens, and I'm not making an excuse for any of this. I mean, it sounds, it's horrible no matter what. But the situation is kind of, it's easy to jump on the bandwagon to ban something when an event like this happens.
Well, but you're confusing me, because you're saying that we've banned bump stock, at least through an executive order.
Yep.
Yet there's no ban on automatic.
Well, it's a lot harder to buy an automatic. That's the reason for the bump stocks. Back in the day, they used to have a device called the Hellfire trigger, And the Hellfire is actually what was used in the Branch Davidians. In fact, the company that I sold knives to, I don't know if I can, well, I'm going to name the company as American Survivalists. They sold the Hellfire triggers to Branch Davidians, and I had just sold them a whole bunch of switchblades. So everybody thought everything was illegal no matter what it was. And I didn't sell the Branch Davidians switchblades, I sold them to American Survivalists. But that Hellfire trigger is just a spring mechanism that went right on the trigger, much like the bump stock is a spring mechanism for the stock area. The Hellfire trigger was simply went behind the trigger and you just put your finger in there and the trigger would bounce back and forth into your hand.
Is that legal today?
Not now. Not now. And that's the issue, is they come up with these devices and they keep circumventing the laws, and they keep allowing for loopholes in these laws to have other devices made. You think it would be simple just to say any device that makes a weapon fire unnaturally, meaning that it would otherwise it wouldn't fire without this device in a pattern that would be considered automatic or semi-automatic, should be illegal to the general public. And I agree with that. I think that's fair.
Why wouldn't Paddock have gone ahead and gotten automatic rifles?
Good question. He had the money, obviously, and he had the time because he planned this over a decent period of time. So that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I can ask Eric and see if he has an idea of what that would be.
Yeah. So as long as we're on the issue of all these mass shootings and so on, people clearly there's been a significant increase in them. What's your theory behind why we've seen such a huge increase in mass shootings and what can be done about it?
I think it's a combination of many factors. I think, you have one side that believes video games have desensitized the teens and adults into, viewing this as more of a video game, like one of the Tom Clancy series or something. And so with that in mind, that takes care of your teenage group mainly, because they already desensitize it to it as they grow older. So seeing it and fantasizing about it, dreaming it, because I don't know if you've ever played a first-person shooter game, but I used to play them extensively. And back in the id days when id created Wolfenstein and Doom and Quake and all those games. And I can tell you that I would go to sleep, or in the middle of the day, I would daydream about, playing that game. But I never thought of actually doing that in real life. But if you're pissed off and you come home and you want to take out some frustrations, it's better to take it out on a video game than to go down and do this. So that's the other end of the spectrum. So that's one area. The other thing is the United States has a very big problem with mental illness. And if you haven't noticed, a lot of these people have some form of mental illness. Now, they keep diagnosing these people after the fact, but for some of the people, they're diagnosed beforehand, and they're all taking similar medications. And there's another area to look at, and that's something that I think that should be explored.
And of course, you're right. Every single mass shooter has been mentally ill. So that gives you 4 times more likelihood right there, just by doubling the population and doubling the number of mental illness.
Right, that's true. And there's a lot of differences between, say, the 50s and today. All of the, you didn't have video games and various other things. You didn't have people watching these movies and violent movies and stuff like this. The stuff.
Yeah, but I used to play War in the backyard.
Yep. Yes, you did. And I remember that. I used to come over there to your house all the time. But
I got it out of my system. You didn't.
That's true. Yeah, I'm still there, but I'm heading across the street here now. The way America has changed over the past 50 or so years. Back in the day, we got behind a bunch of different programs, like when the moonshot and things like that, and America could get together. And I've never seen this before. And let me take a look at this. Here. These are the names of honoring the 58.
Nice.
Let's hang on this chain by the gate here. So,
it's, what are those things that are tied to that chain?
Each of the chains have a piece of metal on it, and the name of one of the 58 is inscribed on or written in indelible ink on those. So
is that new for today, do you think?
I've never seen it before. That's the first time I've seen it.
Is that that's the it's fenced off, obviously, but that's one of the entrances.
Well,
to
I'm
the
at
festival
gate.
grounds.
I think this is gate 6. Let me see. Hey, I'm pretty good. Yeah, gate 6.
Mm-hmm.
So this is gate 6. So this is actually where Carlos came out. The 15-minute, the longer video that everybody remembers seeing. This was the gate he came out of. But that's I've never seen that here. There's really nothing here. The thing is that they've never put up any, well, other than the plan on doing the memorial. They plan on doing that. But the only memorial that's here is Melissa's, which is right across the way here at the end of Alibaba and across the street where I got that video.
Let me ask you, since you're there, about snipers. Should there have been snipers there, and if so, where would they have been, and how effective would they have been?
Well, that gets into some of the MACTAC and how they're supposed to respond to these types of situations. And what you're looking at with you're probably hearing a lot of wind again. Let me turn around so I can actually talk to you. Putting snipers up is a catch-22 because they have to identify the target, determine if the target is still a credible threat, and then take out the target. If they're really good, then they just take out the weapon. But the main thing is to remove the threat. And and that's what's going to happen from here on out, because some of the changes will be just that. Will be them actually putting snipers in the locations. They actually tried to have a sniper shoot a scenario similar to this. I'm going to try to cover this microphone. Similar to this with a sniper rifle in a helicopter, flying over here over the event, and then hey, janitor just got here. Guess somebody's coming home. But the way that they're planning on doing that is to have them set up in strategic locations. Now for here, obviously with those 2 towers right there in the background, you can climb up inside there. I actually went inside those the last time or about a year ago, and everybody thought that was a possible place where they were firing from because they believe there were multiple shooters.
If there had been snipers on the rooftop of Mandalay Bay, is there any reason?
Wouldn't have done anything.
Why not?
Well, if you're on top of imagine being on top of the building, you're trying to shoot down into room 32.
Well, I'm thinking about the other tower or the other wing.
Yeah, well, the thing is the placement of the sniper is obviously the same situation as the placement of the shooter. So both are just as equally important. So you'd have to think like the shooter and determine where is it you want to be.
Lower your microphone just a little bit because you're a little too loud there. Yeah. Right. Well, so, I mean, you're looking at the hotels now and knowing where Paddock was. Is there if you had been on a different wing of the Mandalay Bay, or if you'd been on the Delano, would that have made a difference?
Delano would have not worked at all because it's essentially behind, and I'm getting closer to the Mandalay Bay, so you'll actually get a very good perspective here in just a moment. Maybe we'll go find some glass. But the angle wouldn't work. Now, if I was if my room in 32219, I could shoot at one of the rooms, so I would not have been able to hit him in 32135. But when he came over to 32134, I probably could have hit him if he was at the window. But he wasn't at the window. He was laying across the bed. So I still wouldn't have been able to hit him.
What about the Life is Beautiful festival downtown? We know that he scoped it out a week before the Vegas shooting. I think they just held that festival again.
Yeah, they did
a couple months ago.
Yeah. Now when he was at the Ogden, the question is was this going to be an event at the Ogden? I don't think so. Basically, because he took a number of trips back and forth to Mesquite, back to Mandalay Bay, and he did not do that same thing when he was at the Ogden. So he brought a number of suitcases, whatever, there, and of course at Mandalay Bay, it was a little easier for him because he was more known. And as you saw when I was going up the service elevators, how easy that was to do. He didn't seem to have a problem here.
Yeah. What about security for the Life is Beautiful festival? Do you know if they had snipers? Do you know what extra things they put in place?
I don't know if they I seriously doubt they had snipers. It's possible. I don't want to say they didn't and they did, but I'll say I would say no, that they didn't.
How about extra security in the hotels to make sure nobody's bringing rifles up to their rooms during the Life is Beautiful festival.
Well, that's what you would think. The only hotel here that actually went out of their way to make extra security in the last few years is the Wynn. And of course, we saw how well that worked when I went up their service elevators. But the extra security that they put into place since the shooting, now keep in mind when I did the elevator trips the first 27 times before I took Laura Loomer up, then they did a statement that they were going to look at the footage and change the security. Well, they changed their security, and then I did it again. So the problem with their security is they're throwing technology at a human problem. And so what you need to do is have well-trained employees knowing what to look for. And if that would have been the case, it probably would have been different. The number of bags going to the room, the guys helping them load the bags.
Well, that should be your next test, is trying to get up to a Mandalay Bay room with three duffel bags. No. But you got to do it. You got to do it with 3 duffel bags.
You don't want to do this live? Come on, Jim. The ratings on your show would go through the roof. I am going to do that while I'm here. So if this airs tomorrow, they're going to know about it. So they'll probably put me on some sort of list. But who knows? I'm probably on that list because
we'll see how good their facial recognition technology is. Let me ask you for an update on FBI, FOIA requests, etc.
Okay.
What do you know about? Is the FBI going to release anything else? And aren't there these outstanding FOIA requests trying to get the information? Because all we've seen so far is a 2.5-page letter.
Yeah, and the thing is, what people have to remember is the FBI was not the lead on this case. LVMPD was the lead. The FBI was a supportive role. So we were looking for a report that we probably should have thought more clearly about and understood that we weren't going to get that. But all of what I was told, and what my understanding is that all of the reports were sent back to LVMPD, and that they should have disseminated those out to the public or out to the media as they were required to do by the court. And they didn't do that. In fact, it's my estimate and the estimate of a few other people here that they're behind the scenes guys that I actually I owe a lot of credit to. There's 2 guys here. Well, of course, one is Wego and the other is LVSA. On YouTube, and those guys have done a tremendous amount of work on archiving all of this information. And what has come out of that, especially with the work of LVSA, is and that's Las Vegas Shooting Archive, by the way. What's come out of that is that there's an estimate of at least probably about 50% of the documents and videos, so body-worn camera videos and various other footage and stuff that was supposed to be released to the media was never done. So the court order, effectively, Sheriff Lombardo and the LVMPD is in contempt of court because they were ordered to release it all. That would mean everything, including whatever they've acquired from the cameras that were taken from the public, the footage from people's cell phones, if they did do that, and quite a few other things. But we've never seen it.
What about the plaintiffs' lawyers? I would think they would want this information, and they certainly have the resources to get it.
You would think, and I don't think I think at a certain point, once they realize that the case has gone into settlement talks, that maybe that part of the action on their part would slow down, and that would probably hinder their ability to do stuff. If they're still hammering the other lawyers while they're trying to get other stuff, the other lawyers probably wouldn't respond in kind. So they probably have an agreement of saying, okay, you're going to stop what you're doing there, and we're going to negotiate on the amount at this point. No more asking for this or that.
As far as documents from the FBI, though, I think Rouse has been quoted as saying that we've got over 1,000 agents and over 100 offices investigating this. So that sounds like a lot of work product.
It is a lot. And I have with another person, her name, we'll just call her Michelle. She was able to get a FOIA approved, and I'm going to help her with that. And we've got 28 CDs worth of information coming to us for over 14,000 documents, all on just Stephen Paddock. That's 14,000 documents or pages just on Stephen Paddock. So, and we don't know really what's all going to be included in there. My FOIA requests, I've got 3 in there that are fairly large requests. And mainly, I'm trying to get the ballistics right now is what I've been trying to do. I was going to ask Sheriff Lombardo that this morning.
And what has the FBI said in response to your FOIA requests?
Nothing so far. They haven't really approved or disapproved it. They said that one of them said it was overly broad and burdensome, and that it would be handled by, and I got that basic response that a lot of people got back, was that all the information will be put into the FBI vault. But the FBI vault is not a term of a physical location. It's actually part of their website, that they put information that they release to the public in a certain area where you can go take a look at it and what have you. And that's where they said they're going to put it. But it's 2 years now, and we don't have anything there. And I'm hoping that they're not going to wait until they get all of it that they're going to do done and put it in there. They can make it a work in progress and just put it in there, because it's a large amount of information.
Yeah, they made a lot of bold conclusions in that 2.5-page letter, including that ISIS had absolutely nothing to do with it. I would just like to see some of the supporting documentation.
Yeah, well, I can back them up on that one. ISIS, in this particular case, I know we talked about a lady that had a different opinion of that, but the intelligence community would be screaming quite a bit. If ISIS had something to do with it, you would have already heard cries come out from the intelligence community of several whistleblowers talking about that particular scenario. It just didn't happen.
Yeah, no,
there was no chatter.
I tend to agree. I'm just kind of curious because it is so significant that ISIS claimed responsibility twice through official channels, and it turned out that it was bogus. I would love to kind of see, what investigation was done of that and how they just, concluded.
Yeah, you'll never 100%. See that. Yeah, they're never going to show you that. They're not going to say how they were able to find out something wasn't going to happen. The intelligence community is not very good on that. They're going to basically tell you that through our investigation and through blah, 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 we were able to determine ISIS had nothing to do with it, and that's all you're going to hear. They're not going to tell you how they were able to know that they weren't going to do it, because that would tip the hand over to ISIS to say, hey, this is how we find out, and here you go. Which, one of the things a lot of people don't know is that a lot of the intelligence gathering now is done through video games. Sorry about the background noise. But a lot of the intelligence gathering is actually done through video games. You have a lot of people that are hired to work for, we'll just call it a agency somewhere, and they play video games all day long, and they play the video games with ISIS members. Would you believe that? Isn't that crazy? That's what they do, and because that is now the communication of choice.
Ex-ISIS members or current?
Current ISIS members. And the reason, well, not so current now because ISIS is pretty old. I wouldn't say disbanded, but it's
what video game are they playing?
They're playing first-person shooters, but the game system is PlayStation, and that's essentially the method that they choose for communication, because it's very hard to monitor communication over a video game channel, because those things are set up and taken down at will, and each one is encrypted.
Right.
All these different things.
So the FBI is listening in on it by participating somehow in the back channels of those games.
Not the FBI, but yes,
CIA.
CIA would be
U.S.
one
Army.
Of them. Keep guessing. You say in the 3-letter range, and you'll get it eventually. But I'll neither confirm nor deny.
3-letter range. DEA? No.
No, wouldn't be DEA. DEA would be domestic. CIA would be foreign and domestic, and there's another agency that handles just primarily like 99% foreign.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll come up.
It's the largest agency in the world of its type.
I'm out of guesses. Come on,
all right.
Come on, Michael. Okay, all of our listeners, I'm sure, know what it is. I'm the only one dumb enough not to figure it out.
Well, we'll just say, look up this address, 9800 Savage Road. I'll give you that. How's that?
Okay.